Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. Today is going to be a great conversation about our SAFSF Farm Bill principles. And we're hoping to leave a significant portion of today, approximately 30 minutes, for questions and answers. So we'll kind of run through our principles for the first part, and then the second part of the call will be hopefully a really engaging conversation. So Holly, if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide. So yeah, we're gonna begin with our land acknowledgement as always. So as funders and advocates working to create a more equitable U.S. agriculture and food system, SAFSF believes it is imperative for us to acknowledge the roots of today's inequities lie deep in the history of land theft and dispossession from Indigenous peoples. I am based in Charlottesville, Virginia, and Monacan and Monahoac land. As you introduce yourselves in the chat, Traci just popped in some links. We encourage you to acknowledge the traditional Indigenous inhabitants of the land you are on and to learn more about that history. You can find maps and more resources about the land you're on, again, at the links that Traci just put in the chat. Thank you, Traci, for doing that. Holly, next slide, please. Yeah, and then so today's call structure, again, as I mentioned, Traci is going to kind of kick us off by presenting an overview of the Farm Bill, why it matters, why we're engaged in this work. Paul at the Walton Family Foundation and also a co-chair of our policy committee is going to then review how these principles were developed. And then Traci, Paul, and myself will be kind of reviewing each of our principles in depth, and then we will again kick it off for questions and discussion. So I am going to turn it over to you, Traci, for the overview and background.
All right. Well, thanks, Maggie. So the Farm Bill debate is coming up. It's going to be this year. It's really going to kick off into high gear, and just why the Farm Bill matters so much. I think, most of you know, it really is the one singular largest legislative vehicle that's out there that's specifically designed to address farm, food, and fiber issues. And it has a direct impact not only on farming livelihoods, but who even gets to farm, who gets to own land, who gets to farm, what kinds of foods are grown, and then really how economically disadvantaged families have assistance from the government to feed their families. And I think too, with our vision really being one that we look at where all resources invested in food and agricultural systems enhance our collective well-being, I think that makes the Farm Bill really, really resonant with us and why we should be paying attention to it and engage that process. The next Farm Bill, this is the first time ever that the next Farm Bill is projected to cost over $1 trillion over 10 years. And that's according to the Congressional Research Service. So that's a lot of funding that's being put out into food and agricultural systems, food and fiber agricultural systems. So we think it's really, really important for funders to be engaged in that conversation and to use the power that you do have. I know as private foundations, you can't lobby or anything like that, but you certainly have the power to educate and to engage in that kind of process with members of Congress. So that's why we spend a good significant amount of time focusing on the Farm Bill, because it's a way for you to leverage federal dollars to help you bring about the visions that you're all trying to bring about. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Paul, who's going to lead us through and help you understand how we develop these principles and what that process looked like.
Thanks, Traci. As I think was already said, Paul Wolfe with the Walton Family Foundation's Mississippi River Initiative. And I am also the co-chair of the policy committee. And so we engaged last year in a process of developing some priorities and policy around the Farm Bill and these principles. And so we started with Traci and I and a few others forming a subcommittee that are work on this, regularly to provide some guidance and some input to staff, who then went back and developed an initial draft. And then we went through some rounds of consultation and refinement with outside folks, as well as the policy committee, and having the opportunity to work on that individually with our organizations, and then bring back our input to Traci and the SAFSF staff. And so we last year then sent those, after we finalized them after several rounds of development, to the board of directors to be adopted as kind of a rubric for the organization as we head into the Farm Bill season, as we call it, with it expiring at the end of September of this year, as a way for us to have a ability to rapidly respond to what's happening. I've sort of been involved in 3 farm bills going back to 2012 and the aftermath of 2002. But things happen slowly until they don't. And so this is, I think, is a great opportunity, or a great way for the organization to have some principles ahead of time, so that we're not going through a lot of process with each development in the debate about the upcoming Farm Bill. And I'm happy to say more about the Farm Bill and why it's such an important deal this year and what's at stake, and why it's important to have these. But I think we can maybe do that as we talk about each of the priorities and how they might, or each of the priorities and how those they might be reflected in the Farm Bill debate this year.
All right, so I'm taking over from here and to talk about our first principle. So closing the racial and economic gaps. So we really believe that the Farm Bill should focus on closing those gaps that are created by provisions that subsidize farm consolidation and favor certain production methods, and create barriers to entry for other farmers and ranchers, in particular small and mid-sized, as well as what they call in federal policy historically disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. So we think that that's really important and needs to be a central focus throughout the Farm Bill conversations, whatever title we're talking about, whatever provision in the Farm Bill we're talking about. We need to be talking about how does it create a more equitable system for all of us. And, we have some examples here. That'll be the next slide, Holly, to show what we mean when we're talking about this. And this is, by all means, not, this is not everything. These are just a few examples. So they include, but they're certainly not limited to this. When we're looking at like how the commodity program is structured, which is what supports what people are growing out there, it's really completely unlimited in terms of how that program is structured. So it gives a huge advantage to the largest and wealthiest farmers to outbid many other people, small and mid-size, and Black, Indigenous, and other farmers of color. So we think really, the way that this could be applied is that they actually put some payment limitations on that program. So you're not over subsidizing the largest and wealthiest farms and giving them a competitive advantage over other farmers. There was a provision in the Farm Bill a couple of Farm Bills ago that USDA is supposed to be regularly releasing demographic data on who receives government subsidies. And so far, they actually haven't released that information. So we're thinking that a way to apply this is like actually force USDA to bring that information forward. And then there's more that could be done on heirs property too, to protect that from forced sales, to help stem the loss of informally inherited land in Black, Latino, and Native American communities. And then I think there's much more that the Farm Service Agency could do in terms of equalizing their systems and stopping the discrimination around lending systems to address the loan access barriers that we have. So those are just a few examples of how we see Principle 1 applying. Certainly more to the story on that, but when we look at the Farm Bill overall in terms of how it lives up to this principle, we'll be looking at those kinds of things as well as other things. I think the next one goes back to Paul to talk about our conservation principle.
I have to come off mute. was just starting to say that selfishly, this is a high priority area for the Walton Family Foundation and for what I work on. So, but this is the protecting agricultural lands and environmental health. I'll read a little bit of this quote: "Protect our rich agricultural lands and our long-term environmental health through robust conservation programs that support crop, livestock, and natural diversity, as well as conservation-based farming systems as valuable tools to reduce agricultural risk, support production of nutrient-dense food, sustainable fibers, and address water quality, biodiversity, and climate change mitigation and adaptation." This covers a lot. I mean, all of the conservation title, Title II of the Farm Bill, and the programs that support farmers to adopt and landowners to adopt conservation practices that improve water quality, address climate change mitigation and adaptation, and other resource concerns. So this is really important. Why this is extra important this year, and maybe we can go to the second slide while I'm talking about this, is that the the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed last year included $20 billion of new money to address conservation in the context of climate mitigation. That money was specifically and is sort of outside the Farm Bill, appropriated outside the Farm Bill for climate mitigation in agriculture. And so, that's going to be hugely important to protect that money from being siphoned off for Title I, programs that Traci talked about in the first principle, and also to other priorities that actually can harm the environment and take us backwards on climate change, and to keep it in the mitigation space, and so that money exists. It is, quote unquote, we already have it. It's addition to what there was already in the Farm Bill. And so it's going to be important to protect that. So, increasing funding, modernizing the crop insurance program to our funding is sort of what I already addressed, modernizing the crop insurance program to get out of the way of farmers that want to diversify and undertake conservation practices, while also ensuring that transition to those practices to reduce the risk of moving from monocropping or corn and soybean rotations to more complex rotations and more environmentally friendly methods. And then another piece of this is kind of building up and supporting and trying to expand those basic conservation compliance requirements. That last bullet. So currently all farmers have to do is don't farm on a wetland. And if you have highly erodible land, meaning hillsides, have a plan on how to farm it to reduce or minimize your disturbance, and you can receive as many federal dollars and subsidies as you want. So that's pretty basic. That doesn't mean much. And so supporting efforts to strengthen that.
All right, this is back to me. So this one is about focused on rural communities and really repairing and rebuilding thriving rural communities that are damaged by the Farm Bill provisions that hasten depopulation loss and the loss of economic opportunity. And we're really talking about those provisions that propel consolidation and concentration in the agricultural sector. So I think if you can go to the next slide, Holly, just some examples here. I mean, we touched on some of these earlier too. So again, reforming federal programs and regulations that really help drive that consolidation. I mean, if the Farm Bill is supposed to be the largest legislative vehicle that serves rural communities, sometimes some of those policies do a really good job in helping us hollow out rural America. And we think that there needs to be a bigger focus on funding the provisions that foster rural economic opportunities and give precedent to those communities too, in regions that have suffered consistent population loss and persistent and extreme poverty. And when we're talking about persistent poverty, we're talking about counties that they've had 20% or more of its population has lived in poverty for over the past 30 years. And then when we're talking about extreme poverty, those are areas where the poverty rate was 40% or greater. And there was a recent ERS report that indicated extreme poverty was a uniquely rural problem. Every county that showed extreme poverty was a rural designated county. So I think it's time, high time for the federal farm bill to really look at how do we rebuild rural communities? How do we develop our farm bill policy in a way that supports bringing more farmers into the system, as well as how do we properly support rural communities? I live in rural America myself, and I can tell you that there's some communities where the community is more important to agriculture than agriculture is to the community anymore, because we've consolidated agriculture that far. So I think, you know, it's a real opportunity here to continue to develop the narrative around why the Farm Bill needs to do more to serve rural communities. With that, we'll go to the fourth one, and that's Maggie.
Yeah, thanks, Traci. So yeah, Principle 4 is all about building resilient and local and regional food and fiber systems. So I think, you know, it was very clear during the COVID-19 pandemic that is, you know, still ongoing, that really exacerbated a lot of problems with our food system and really created serious threats to everyday people across the country to be able to feed themselves. But at the same time, COVID really did shine a light on the importance of local and regional food systems and creating resilient communities. Things like cooperatives, farmers markets, direct-to-consumer models like community-supported agriculture and farm-to-family emergency food box programs were really steady and reliable sources of food, even as these sort of national and global supply chains faltered. So, you know, as Congress and as USDA expanded resources for local and regional food systems during COVID, the Farm Bill now presents a really great opportunity to make permanent a lot of those programs, expand the funding, really designed to address things like consolidation, to ensure farm worker health, and to just really recognize the importance and the power of local and regional food systems and meeting the hunger and nutritional needs of communities across the country. So again, just thinking about how these principles could play out in action, again, not limited to these things we have on the slide here, but you know, really want to recognize the inherent value of Indigenous knowledge and community-led solutions. The hyperlink here is referencing some of the platforms put forth by the Native Farm Bill Coalition, you know, prioritizing things like expanding food sovereignty, incorporating native produced and culturally familiar foods, and things like FDIPR, the Food Distribution Program on Indian reservations. Also really want to expand and invest in the small scale infrastructure and really the relationship infrastructure. So thinking about, you know, local meat processing facilities and how we can really expand funding for those efforts across the country. Similarly, expanding the reach and scale of food and nutrition benefits that, you know, are really helping support households as well as local growers. So there are programs like the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program, produce incentives like the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program that can really help a variety of households across the country, and sort of a two-pronged approach here. Another really important aspect of the work that we do on the Farm Bill going forward is going to be protecting the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. You know, I think that's going to be, as Traci will talk about in a little bit, a really big part of this Farm Bill debate. So ensuring that SNAP is protected, ensuring that it's included in the Farm Bill, you know, pushing back against things like work requirements is definitely going to be an important aspect of our work. Similarly, facilitating the ability of schools and hospitals and other kind of public institutions to really source from local and regional food producers. You know, there were programs like the ongoing Agricultural Marketing Services Program, the Local Food Purchasing Assistance Program that can be expanded. And similarly, at kind of rounding this out, really wanting to direct USDA to simplify these processes to make sure that, you know, these grants are as accessible as possible for food and fiber producers across the country. So now I think I'm going to talk a little bit about the purpose and use of these principles, but I'll also, you know, pass to Traci and Paul to chime in here as well. But these principles have a variety of purposes and are not going to be kind of one and done. This will be a part of our ongoing work for 2023. And so we have some bullets here, but really guiding our 2023 Farm Bill agenda and work plan. So these principles are really going to be used to guide any more specific proposals that we put forth. You'll be hearing a little bit more about that going forward. Also guiding our discussions with members of Congress. As many of you know, we have our forum coming up in June, and there's going to be a significant Hill Day and sort of lobbying element of that forum. So we're excited to be able to use these Farm Bill principles to guide those conversations. Similarly, guiding positions we take on Farm Bill proposals from groups in the space, guiding our decision-making regarding any sign-on letter opportunities, and also just guiding conversations with agriculture, food, and philanthropy journalists. And yeah, Traci and Paul, if anyone else wanted to chime in there, please go for it.
No, I think that's good. And, moving forward, some of our next steps with this is, we'll be doing broader outreach. We'll likely be sharing these principles with members of the Senate and House Agriculture committees. We'll be using them more broadly with funders to help educate funders around the Farm Bill and some key areas that we think should be focused on. We'll use these to develop a sign-on letter that we plan to do in a very non-lobbying way. The whole point of developing these principles is so that funders can engage the conversation in a non-lobbying and more educational way. So we'll develop a sign-on letter, and we'll make sure that it takes us right up to the line, but not over the line, so that you're able to sign on to that. And we'll use these principles to really help us organize you as funders around the key Farm Bill debates. Specifically, as Paul and Maggie pointed out, I think the two issues we really need to be focused on in this Farm Bill is what happens with conservation funding, and then if there are attacks from one side of the aisle or the other on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So we really want to be able to help use these principles as a way to guide those conversations and make sure that you all are kept in the loop into how the Farm Bill is living up to them. And I think that takes us to questions and answers. So
Traci, I think you accidentally muted yourself.
I did mute myself. I'm sorry. That takes us to the Q&A portion of the conversation. We could stop sharing the PowerPoint, Holly, and then we can see everyone's faces and have a conversation here. And Paul, you're going to moderate the Q&A, so we'll let you take that away.
Get myself off mute. I think people can feel free to put questions in the comments or raise your hand, and then we can take questions. I see one that was already in the chat about heirs property, and I think that shows up in the first principle as well as potentially in the third principle. But the first principle is about closing the racial and economic gaps created by the policies of USDA and the federal government over the last 150, well, more than that, the last several hundred years, or since the USDA was really created in its current form and post. That means making it easier for people that have challenges, showing ownership to access conservation and other assistance programs, but also trying to address the larger problem of heirs property in general, and the barriers to building wealth and starting businesses, and as well as property title issues, and that make it challenging for tribal members to obtain financing and other USDA programs. So
yeah, and I would add to that, Paul, the last Farm Bill did address heirs property, and I believe it punted. Most of what needs to happen now is at the state level, if I understand it correctly, but there's still, I think, always on the look for how the Farm Bill can do more to help people who've been impacted by heirs property. And so that's kind of where that comes from. Renee, this has been an issue that you've followed with us too. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I think that's correct what you said, Traci, for right now.
Other questions, comments? Curious about your. Yeah. Oh, Paul, do you want to respond to Derek? Because I think that kind of falls in the conservation camp quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that the principle 2, contains a lot of the a lot of provisions, as well as 4, rebuilding rural communities and rural food and regional food systems. But I think that a lot of the programs in the conservation, CSP, and EQIP have the ability to help those farmers in small and diverse systems, support their operation, like the organic cost share program, or other programs that help implement rotations and other sorts of resource concern or resource protecting funding. And then as well in the first one, in the principle 1, around leveling the playing field for these producers. I think we just had a report that came out recently by EWG that found that 87% of the Title I and other subsidies go to 10% of the farmers, and that's going to be the biggest of the big. So I think that I think it's really embedded all over this.
And you probably already spoke to crop insurance, Paul, but I would say that too. And we did a call a few months back with the National Sustainable Ag Coalition that was looking at how to reform crop insurance so that it better serves other than your large scale commodity farmer. And so, that's not only in making it work better for conservation, but also in terms of how that program is structured. That program has absolutely 0 payment limits. And I don't even know if there's adjusted gross income requirements. I think that was a debate in the last farm bill, but so if I had the wherewithal to farm all of 3 states, I could get subsidized crop insurance on every single acre, which seems like a complete imbalance in equitable policy.
Yeah, it also has not as good policy protections if you're not growing the five biggest crops. So if you're in other things, you don't have as good of options as the people growing corn, soybeans, wheat, and rice and peanuts. So
I have a question for a newbie and somebody who doesn't do any work around policy. I was just curious about how you are engaging with like the farmers and the people that receive the SNAP benefits and all of that to help develop all of these principles that you put forward today.
I'm sorry, I was responding to someone in chat. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was wondering how have you, if at all, I don't know if that's part of the process that usually would do in developing these principles and the strategy, engage with the farmers and the people that actually use the SNAP benefits, et cetera, to help prioritize these principles that you're putting forward.
Yeah, if we went through a process of connecting with those with folks like that, with farmers directly or people using.
Yes.
Yeah. Who's asking the question, just so I know who I'm speaking to?
It's me, Fabiola.
Oh, hey, Fabiola. Hi. I thought that was your voice, but it wasn't lighting up your box, so I wanted to make sure. Yeah, we did not connect directly with farmers and people using the programs outside of the fact that, we connected with organizations who work directly with some of those farmers. We connected with our funders who are funding the organizations who are working directly with farmers. We're kind of in this spot where our audience as funders, we're not engaging directly with farmers and ranchers on a regular basis, but we're indirectly connecting to them through the work that you all do as funders. So it's kind of a spot where we I mean, we have our ear to the ground and we're paying attention and we're reading things that people are putting out there, and we're talking to different organizations like the Funder Farm Bill chats that we've been having. We bring those conversations to the mix, and that helps inform what we're doing. So we're constantly reading and talking to people that way. I mean, Maggie and I are connecting with NGOs on a regular basis that are working directly with people that are utilizing these programs. So I suppose that's how we inform ourselves on this work. And yeah, maybe that's not the best answer, but it's kind of.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Like I said, I'm newbie on this, so I'm just trying to figure out how the process goes. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyone on the call, does anyone on the call have principles that you're engaging or utilizing, or do you have questions on how you can use these principles or anything like that we can talk to? And Mark Muller, I see you're on the call. Maybe you want to mention the big climate fly-in that's happening too coming up. Oh, you're on mute, Mark. Let me see if I can unmute you. No.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Traci. I apologize, and it's not helping that my teenage daughter is making fun of me right now. But yeah, as you saw, and I don't know that much about it, but Traci sent out this March 6th campaign that is kind of being led by Farm Aid and National Sustainable Ag Coalition, called the Rally for Resilience. And I really appreciate it that they have kind of a broad stroke, a broad brush that they're using to talk about the climate issue and going beyond carbon. Carbon is a clear component of it, but also making sure that farmers and other land stewards can withstand future floods and droughts and things like that. So we actually just we committed $10,000 to help make this happen, and yeah, encourage others to find out more about it. You can reach Farm Aid directly, but I'd be glad to help also. But I think this could be an important rally. Unfortunately, I know some of you might be going. I'm going to be going to the Environmental Grantmakers Association conference in DC the week before, so I don't know if people want to make a second trip out there, but there'll be a lot happening, so there'll be plenty of things to get engaged in.
Other questions, comments? I mean, they don't have to be about the principles. We can ask general Farm Bill related questions too, or other things too.
I think one of the biggest obstacles is the complexity about getting aid, which I know we brought to the USDA before. I know that they're starting to have, the ability to do things online, but I think if we just really emphasize that if you're not sitting with a grant maker, getting any money from the USDA for any reason is extraordinarily difficult, and it's an enormous barrier to entry. I mean, even when we offer to pay for someone to hire grants, grant people to look at it, it just is overwhelming for the average small business.
Yeah, Kathy, you're right on target with that, and it is something that we've been talking to USDA about. And I think at the forum is going to be at the forum we're going to be doing a plenary session with a couple of members of the Equity Commission, and I'm pretty close to securing Margot Schlanger, who's going to be the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights. And she's actually going to be the person who's in charge of implementing the recommendations that come from the Equity Commission. And I think that needs to be a big focus, is how, USDA liberalizing their programs a little bit and making it easier for people to so that funding actually lands where the Equity Commission, is talking about. And I think it's an area where funders can make a big impact if we have a coordinated strategy that's in concert with USDA. And, you know, we did hear from USDA that they wanted to work with us on a cooperative agreement. So Renee and I worked with them and put together a proposal that they were supposed to then respond to and provide some additional edits. But we were asking them for money to get that program up and going. And then we thought our members would be the source of funding to actually pull some funding together to support that TA for groups. Well, I think USDA was shocked that we asked for money because I think they viewed us as a funder rather than a 501c3 like other NGOs. So that's some education we need to do with USDA there too. But there's definitely going to be more work on that front moving forward. And I think our forum is going to be, while we're not going to be going to USDA specifically, we're going to have a webinar with USDA officials leading up to the forum in May. And then, so stay tuned for information on that. And then we'll have that plenary with the Equity Commission and hopefully the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights. And I think that could be a big theme for philanthropy to engage in that conversation, is this is where we can help. So help us help you.
Right, because what I'm seeing is when I recommend it to particularly in the Native American and in the Black and the Latino, people who are not already in the system and have a level of comfort with the complexity, and they don't trust the system anyway.
Yeah.
And then to jump through the hoops, and usually there's some minor thing that'll get the thing kicked out anyway. So it's, you know, we really need to work on that.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing I would add is I totally agree, Kathy, and I think that we're all going to have a role in trying to help that happen, whether it's funding organizations to have the capacity to do the stuff that USDA can't do, or changing the rules to get USDA to do that, and then additionally the second one is really USDA is going to have to change how they do things, and we're going to try to force them to change how they do things, because they just got $20 billion more to spend on conservation. And yes, the conservation programs have been oversubscribed, but USDA has 10 years to spend that money till 2032. They are not going to be able to spend an additional $20 billion by 2032, doing the business the way they've been doing for the last whatever number of years, because they don't have enough people, and they don't have to make everybody come into an NRCS office and do a comprehensive plan, a resource plan. They're going to have to figure out ways, and I think the start of that we're going to see in the next few weeks. USDA got $250 million in 2023 from the Inflation Reduction Act, and they're in the next, between now and the end of February, they're going to announce how they're going to spend that, and even that money. A lot of it, people are saying, is going to be stuff that's already in the pipeline, but when you're adding a third more money to these programs, they're going to have to change, and we're trying to work with everybody to tell them how to do that in a way that is more equitable and available to more people. So
thank you.
And I think those are messages that when we do the Hill Day at the forum, those are messages that we can talk to Congress about, talk to the members of the Senate and House Agriculture committees about, and in a way that is educational, and like where philanthropy is wanting to put money on the line to help these programs serve the communities that they need to serve. And so, just real quick, I just wanted to talk about what we're all going to be doing leading up to the forum that will connect to these principles and our conversations around them. So we are going to be doing a training. We're going to work on lining up a training with Boulder Advocacy leading up to the forum, so that you all feel very confident and understand exactly how you can do that meeting that doesn't put you in any jeopardy, so that you're doing it in a very educational manner. Rather than any kind of lobbying way. So I know that's very important as a private foundation. You can't cross that line. So we're going to make sure that these meetings are done in a way that allows you to engage those conversations without crossing that line. So we'll do a training with them to do that. And then we're also going to have a call like the week before the forum that is going to be kind of telling us, getting us up to speed on where things are with the Farm Bill, where's the conversation at the moment. And then the day of the Hill Day at the forum, we're going to have a training that morning, not really a training, but more of a setting the landscape for what you're going to be looking at. What are the conversations that are happening on the Hill right now, and how's that going to affect any meetings you're having, or what's the scenario you're walking into in different offices, and what are they prioritizing, so that you kind of understand where that member of Congress or their staff is coming from. So Maggie and I are super excited, and the policy committee is helping plan this work too. We're just super excited to get all this together and engage you all. And we really hope to see you all in Washington, DC, June 12th through the 14th. And, you know, be able to talk about these principles with members of Congress and their staff, and why they matter to you, as well as other things that you want to talk about that relate to food and agriculture. What you've learned through your funding, and where you see struggles and where you see real opportunity. So anyway, pretty excited about that. Other questions, comments?
Traci, could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Somewhat following up on the question that Kathy asked in Paul's response. I'm really curious, for example, like the climate smart commodities funding that came out, and the carve out that was for groups that were focused on more on Black, Indigenous organizations of color. And then the USDA, the land access and access to land and capital proposals that were submitted last fall. I was pretty excited. You know, the climate smart ones, there are several that I was not crazy about, but several that I was. And I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to hearing what happened with the USDA land access proposals. And where can we make noise, or where those decisions get made? For example, Paul, you mentioned that 250 million that was there, and USDA trying to figure out what to do with it. So I assume it's within the USDA's where we would talk to people to say that we really like these type of granting opportunities, or it's just not really clear to me where the decision makers are on those type of things.
Oh, you want to respond to that?
I mean, in the conservation space, it's Robert Bonney and the chief of the NRCS, but that's where the decisions, you know, and are being made.
So does it make sense for us to try to meet with Robert Bonney, that type of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so Mark, since we don't have time in the agenda at the forum to fit everything in, right? But we do want to do a meeting with USDA leading up to the forum, so we could do that. And then if some of us want to organize some side meetings like that, we could do that, you know, outside of the forum agenda too. So I'd be happy to talk with anyone who's interested in that.
All right, thank you.
And I know that, I mean, USDA is not going to sit on the sidelines and they're going to have an agenda for the Farm Bill too, because all this money that they've been putting out, especially in local and regional food systems, they're wanting to secure that somehow, like, so that they don't lose all that money. But so I think talking with maybe the Office of Congressional Relations and seeing what's going to happen there with their Farm Bill work might be an idea too.
I do think hopefully by June as well, there'll be a new deputy secretary, and hopefully, personal opinion, that it's the rural development current rural development director, former congressperson from New Mexico, gets, you know, is the word on the street is she's under consideration. I think that would probably be a great choice, not having any real interaction, but I think somebody like that has experience in DC would be great. We often get pushed towards the Office of Partnerships and Outreach because we're funders, and frankly, I don't think they have a lot of they don't have a lot of funding available at their fingertips or control over any funding. And don't have the ability to drive other agencies with USDA to make decisions.
Dave is celebrating the idea of, I'm bad at pronouncing names, Dave. So do you want to, Dave, you might know her.
Yeah, Sochi and I went to law school together.
Awesome.
Yeah, so really excited for her and her accomplishments, and I think it's going to be a really great thing for USDA, but even a better thing for New Mexico. So really excited about that.
That's great. Well, Dave, if that happens before the forum, let's make note of that and let's go have a conversation. We should, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I think so. I think it'd be a really great opportunity, learn about her priorities and then share some of the principles that you've shared as well. Outline those.
Yeah. Does anyone want to give a thumbs up if they're interested in meeting with USDA while we're there? It would have to be outside the forum agenda, but we could make that happen. You want a thumbs up from Mark? You can use the little emoji reactions. Dave. Okay. Sarah. All right. Well, Bill. Okay. So there's interest there. Okay. We can work on that. We'll just add it to the list, right, Maggie?
Love it. Worth it.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, I suppose we could give you 10 minutes back in your day. We appreciate you taking time to join us, and don't hesitate to ever reach out if you have questions about any of this or just Farm Bill in general. And Fabiola, don't be afraid of the fact that you're a newbie to the conversation. We need all the newbies to the conversation. So I love it. My first time was 2002, and wow, it was acronym soup for me. And
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, and this is like a big bill, right? So yeah, thank you.
it is a lot to take in. So yeah, just please reach out with any questions, or just if you want to have conversations, we're always happy to speak with everyone. So don't hesitate to give us a call or give us an email.
Yeah, I absolutely just wanted to second that. And then I think Traci mentioned in the chat, but we will also be planning to share out a kind of PDF version of the principles that we talked about today. We can also share the slide deck. And we're currently in the process of getting these principles up in a kind of more engaging way on our website. So we'll be sure to share that all out with you in the coming week.
Paul, any last comments?
No, thank you for everybody for coming. Yeah, I'm also always available. So if anybody wants to talk Farm Bill, I appreciate it. Thank you. And it was a great process. Appreciate Traci and Maggie and everybody else's and Renee's work on all of this.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.